For all 15 years of our marriage, my wife considered me a husband behind my back, but it's surreal to find myself posting on Reddit. Never thought I'd be that person with a story to share, but here I am. I'm 42, and my wife is 41. We've been married for a solid 15 years, and up until recently, I'd always felt that we had a comfortable, understanding dynamic. There were unspoken roles we both took on, and I never questioned or hesitated about fulfilling my part. Yet now, I'm sitting here, questioning everything I thought I knew about my marriage. You see, one thing that's apparently surprised her, and I mean genuinely shocked her, is my willingness and ability to manage household chores. To me, these tasks aren't anything special, they're just part of life. I never saw them as beneath me or felt the need to dodge them. My mom drilled the importance of helping out into me from an early age. She believed in raising kids who could take care of themselves and their surroundings. She made sure I knew that cleanliness wasn't just about tidiness. It was a way of respecting the shared space we lived in. If I left my mess for others, it was a sign of disregard. My mom's influence runs deep. I've somehow inherited her near-compulsive need for a clean environment. For example, I physically can't sit down and enjoy a meal if there's a mess staring back at me. It's not about appearances or a need for perfection. It's just hardwired in me that chaos equals discomfort. My family's approach to home life wasn't just about chores, though. My mom was a fantastic cook. One of those people who could throw together a meal that felt like magic on a plate. Her sister, my aunt, actually worked as a professional chef at a high-end hotel. So she brought that professional touch to family gatherings. And my dad, he wasn't a cook, but he loved his barbecues, making our house the go-to for summer cookouts. Growing up in a family like that, cooking became second nature to me. By the time I was in my teens, I could handle most meals and even put my own spin on a few recipes. That said, there's one thing I could never get right: making a decent cup of tea or coffee. No matter how many times I tried, it just never turned out well. My wife would laugh and joke about it, calling me the chef who couldn't master the simplest of beverages. And honestly, I was fine with that. I can whip up a 4-course meal, but if you ask me to make a cup of coffee, I'll end up with something undrinkable. So over time, I found myself doing most of the cooking and cleaning without even thinking twice about it, especially as she often comes home exhausted. When we had children, our daughter, who's 11, and our son, who's 9, I wanted to pass on some of that self-sufficiency. I've tried to get them involved in small chores here and there, encouraging them to help with tasks appropriate for their age. I want them to grow up knowing how to take care of their surroundings and not expecting someone else to do everything for them. I hoped they'd see that cleaning and cooking aren't just jobs, but ways to contribute to a family and create a comfortable home. Now my wife has a group of friends she meets with regularly, and every few weeks they take turns hosting. This time, it was her turn, and I thought it'd be best to clear out with the kids, give her and her friends space to relax and chat. I offered to take the kids out for the day, and she was more than happy with that arrangement. But before leaving, I had some work to finish up in my home office. My office setup is just above the living room, so I could hear their conversation drifting up. It wasn't intentional. I wasn't eavesdropping, but I started to catch bits and pieces, and before I knew it, I was paying close attention. One of her friends asked how she managed to keep the house so spotless, given how busy she is with work. I assumed she'd laugh it off, or at least mention that I do a fair share. But instead, she took all the credit. She claimed it was all her doing, that she kept everything running smoothly and maintained this perfect image of the household. It was almost like she wanted her friends to think she had it all under control without any help. The conversation then shifted, and her friends started unloading about their own marital issues. It seemed like a venting session, with each of them sharing how unhelpful or inconsiderate their husbands could be. As they commiserated, it hit me hard that my wife wasn't defending me or offering a different perspective. She wasn't saying, "Oh, my husband does his part," or "we share the load." She just stayed silent, as if I didn't exist in that equation at all. That feeling, the invisibility, the disregard, it gnawed at me. I felt so uncomfortable, and the thought of hearing any more of it made me cringe. So I got up, grabbed the kids, and we left for the day. Later that evening, once her friends had gone, I acted like everything was fine, just like every other night. But when we went to bed, I couldn't shake off what I'd heard, so I brought it up. I asked her why she had painted this picture of herself as the sole caretaker, as if I didn't contribute at all. She looked at me with a mix of surprise and annoyance, and her response was that I shouldn't take it so personal. She said she only did it to fit in with her friends and the struggles they were sharing. That explanation didn't sit right with me. I wasn't asking for a constant parade of gratitude, and I didn't expect her to sing my praises in front of her friends. But a little acknowledgement, a simple, "my husband's pretty helpful around the house," would have been enough. Just some recognition, so I don't end up looking like the stereotypical lazy husband who lounges while his wife does all the heavy lifting. Since that conversation, though, things have taken an unexpected turn. She's become cold and distant, almost as if I'd done something wrong by bringing it up. It feels like she thinks I'm weaponizing my help around the house, turning it into leverage or some kind of bargaining chip. That's not what I wanted at all. I just wanted to feel seen. Now, every time I pick up a dish or put away laundry, there's this tension in the air. I get the sense that she's waiting for me to throw it in her face or hold it against her. Update: I never expected my original post to blow up the way it did. I posted it out of frustration, not really thinking it would resonate with so many people. But here I am, reading through responses from strangers who are sharing insights and support I didn't even realize I needed. The overwhelming reaction made me reflect deeply on my own situation, pushing me to take a step back and ask myself some difficult questions. After gathering my thoughts, I decided to approach my wife again, hoping that maybe this time we could really communicate. I approached the conversation carefully, not wanting to come off as accusatory or overly dramatic. I tried to frame it gently, saying I understood it might not seem like a huge deal to her, but that it hurt to hear her take all the credit in front of her friends. I wanted her to know that while it wasn't the end of the world, it wasn't kind either. But her reaction caught me off guard. She immediately went on the defensive, telling me to stop bitching and just get over it already. She did apologize, but it was the sort of apology that comes with an eye roll and a sigh. One that says, I just want you to drop this and move on. It was obvious she was tired of hearing about it, and I could feel the resentment bubbling up between us. I sensed she was getting ready to argue, her voice raising slightly and her posture tense. So I did my best to diffuse things. I shifted the conversation to something I thought could actually help us, discussing how we could share responsibilities at home in a way that felt fair to both of us. I brought up the fact that I handle most of the cooking, cleaning, and even things like planning our date nights and family vacations. I admitted that I was feeling worn down by carrying the weight of nearly every domestic responsibility and that it felt lopsided. Before I could even finish my thought, she was in my face, looking at me with this intense expression, as if I had crossed some invisible line. She snapped back, telling me I had no right to lecture her about chores when I was home most of the time. I could hardly believe her tone. It felt like she was dismissing everything I did, reducing my contributions to the fact that I happened to work from home. Her words stung, making it seem like being home somehow invalidated the effort I put into running our household and taking care of our children. The conversation went nowhere. She wouldn't hear me out, wouldn't even consider the possibility of adjusting things between us. Her stance was firm. This was the arrangement that worked best, and there was no need to change. When I brought up how I wanted to feel more appreciated for my efforts, she shut it down completely, telling me that her role as the primary breadwinner balanced everything out. It was like a wall went up, and there was no getting through to her. She seemed completely uninterested in any discussion that challenged the status quo. The next morning, her mood hadn't improved. She came downstairs clearly annoyed, her face set in that way that lets everyone know she's not to be disturbed. I could tell our kids picked up on the tension. I tried to keep things light for their sake, making small talk with them as I packed up their lunches and prepared to drive them to school. The last thing I wanted was for them to feel the strain between us, especially over something they couldn't understand. After dropping them off, I came back home, still reeling from our argument. That's when I noticed her lunch sitting on the counter, neatly packed and untouched. Normally, I'd have texted her about it or driven it to her office. But today, I just didn't feel like it. I felt drained, emotionally battered by the constant strain between us. It was like the woman I'd been married to for 15 years had suddenly transformed into someone I barely recognized, someone who couldn't see or appreciate the things I did for our family. I sat there looking at the abandoned lunch, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. How had we ended up here? How had the little things I did to support her, to keep our household running, turned into something that seemed to anger? Every attempt I made to reach out to her since our last conversation had been ignored. I sent her texts, tried calling her, hoping to bridge the gap and find some resolution. But she left me hanging each time, her silence speaking volumes. It's hard to put into words how isolating it feels. I never thought I'd be in a situation where my own wife would ignore me, shut me out completely, and refuse to acknowledge my concern. I worry about the example this sets for our children. They see their parents not speaking, the subtle glances, the tension in the air. This kind of cold war brewing between us isn't what I want them to experience or internalize. They deserve to grow up in a home where both parents respect each other, where issues are addressed openly rather than festering in silence. Update: I think I've reached my breaking. There's no other way to put it. This is it. The person I married 15 years ago feels like a stranger, and every attempt to salvage our relationship has only been met with hostility, indifference, or outright contempt. After countless arguments, cold shoulders, and silent treatments, I finally did something that I never thought I would. I went through her phone. In the past, we shared our passwords freely, never feeling the need to keep secrets from each other. But this time was different. I'd never had cause to doubt her fidelity, But some of the comments people made about potential cheating crept into my mind, and paranoia got the better of me. It was a last-ditch effort, a way to confirm or dispel the lingering fears that had been eating away at me. What I found was, in some ways, worse than an affair. I stumbled upon a group chat with her work friends, a separate circle from the ones who had visited our house. As I scrolled through the messages, I saw a stream of comments that turned my stomach. It was post after post mocking me, making fun of things I'd done for her, things that were meant to make her feel loved, appreciated, and supported. Every gesture, every small effort I'd made to be a good husband had become a punchline for her and her colleagues. She went on about how embarrassing it was to be married to someone who acts more like a parent than a partner. She painted me as some kind of doting fool who smothers her with attention. And the lunches I packed for her? Apparently they were a source of deep humiliation. She called them cringe-worthy because I included small treats, knowing what she liked. She told her friends she was mortified by it, that it made her feel like a child. The worst part? She admitted to throwing out the snacks I'd made, calling them childish, despite the fact that she'd happily eat them at home. Then there were the memes. One image showed me scrubbing a bathroom tile, something she had apparently snapped without my knowledge. She'd edited it to look like I was wearing a frilly dress, captioned with something about being a 1960s housewife. Her friends found it hilarious, leaving laugh reactions and comments that only fueled her mock. They laughed at me for putting effort into our home, ridiculed me for doing things I thought made our lives easier, and turned my contributions into a running joke. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I closed her phone and left the bedroom, numb. My mind was a blur of emotions: anger, sadness, disbelief, and above all, a profound sense of betrayal. This was the woman I had devoted myself to, the woman I had celebrated 15 years of marriage with only a few weeks ago. How could she see my love and effort as something to be ashamed of, something to belittle and mock? The next morning, I couldn't stay silent. I confronted her, bringing up the chat and everything I had seen. She was instantly defensive, her face going pale, and I could see the panic in her eyes as she tried to come up with an explanation. But I didn't let her spin any excuses. I was too hurt, too angry to sit through another round of her brushing off my feelings or minimizing the impact of her action. I told her that her words and the way she portrayed me to others had shattered whatever respect I'd had left for her. I turned my focus to our kids that morning, making sure they were ready for the day, packing their lunches, and dropping them off at school. She stood there, watching, but I ignored her attempts to speak. There was nothing left to say. Not after I had seen how she really viewed me. Even now, she's blowing up my phone with texts and calls, desperate to explain, to talk, to work things out. But her words feel hollow. How could I take anything she says seriously when she's already shown me the truth? This is the woman I spent 15 years with, the mother of my children, the person I thought was my partner in life. Yet now, looking back on all those moments, I feel foolish. I feel like a joke. Every anniversary, every act of kindness, every small effort to make her life better, it all feels like a lie now, a charade that only I was invested in. There's no coming back from this. She's not just embarrassed by me. She's humiliated by my love and dedication. She finds the things I do for her laughable, even shameful, and instead of talking to me or sharing how she felt, she turned me into a character for her friends to mock. We may have celebrated 15 years together last month, but after what I've learned, those years feel like a hollow shell. I feel used, like my devotion was something to be quietly tolerated and publicly ridiculed. For the sake of our kids, I know I'll have to approach this carefully. They deserve stability, a peaceful home, and parents who can at least maintain civility. But the idea of staying with her now, pretending that everything's fine, feels impossible. This isn't a partnership, it's a performance. And I don't think I can keep playing the role of the devoted husband while she sneers at me behind my back. This will be my last update, as there's no point in dragging this out any longer. I need to take some time to process everything, to figure out what comes next. Maybe this is the end of our marriage. Maybe it's just the beginning of a long, difficult journey toward understanding who I am outside of this relationship. Either way, I can't stay here, in this place of hurt and humiliation, pretending that things will ever go back to the way they were. If nothing else, I've learned a hard truth. Love, loyalty, and devotion mean nothing if the person you're giving them to can't appreciate it. And maybe, just maybe, it's time I started valuing myself enough to find someone who does.